All right, welcome to Avory Idea Day 2022. It's obviously good timing for investors, partners, and followers to come listen about what's going on in different industries and, more importantly, companies. I'm Sean Emery. I am the co-founder of Avory and Company. And today, what we wanted to do was bring you inside of some of the companies and industries that we follow or focus on. Now, we're big believers, and history has proven that the real drivers of returns are businesses themselves. We started Avory with several principles: know what you own and why, seek out structural winners that won't just win over the next 10 months, but over the next 10 years, and really find areas or business transformations that can unlock value. Lastly, for us is really around patience pays over time. Now, a little bit more on Avory for those that aren't as familiar. We are an investment manager based in Miami, Florida. We manage a high conviction equity portfolio focused on structural growth stories, transformation stories, and in many cases, these are companies where the long-term story is underappreciated. And then transformation stories, it's really around companies that are misunderstood. So we have a very smart team where we use data as a way of not only discovering value, but also tracking opportunities and also managing risk. For today, the agenda looks as follows. So we have a strong lineup. First, we're going to talk with Placer AI. They are one of the leaders in foot traffic in the physical world. We'll also get a sense of trends for fitness, retail, luxury, and a couple other categories. Obviously, we have positions in Planet Fitness and Capri and others, so that'll be a pretty important conversation to kick off. Then we're going to bring on the CFO from Duolingo. This is a company we're excited about. It sits firmly in one of the structural growth categories that we appreciate: education disruption. We'll then have the founder of Golf Plus. They're one of the leading apps inside of the Oculus App Store and that ecosystem. They saw record growth here in the last couple months. And so we're going to bring them on to share a little bit more about the metaverse and kind of in general what's going on in that ecosystem. After that is Nutanix. And this is a perfect example of a transformation story. We believe the story there is misunderstood and the future is bright. But besides that, we're trying to share the story that is taking place there. Lastly is Sensor Tower. We'll bring them on and we'll talk about the digital world and more app data and talk about how download trends and other ideas and topics. Lastly, Chris Fuentes, analyst here at Avory, and I will summarize some of the conversations that we have had. Before that, here's a quick disclaimer for everybody involved in the event. This event is for informational purposes only and does not constitute investment recommendations or advice. A company's actual results could differ materially from those described in any forward-looking statements or announcements discussed. So with that, we're going to bring on our first guest from Placer AI. We have Ethan. You've probably seen him in the past. But we have Ethan here that will join us momentarily. Ethan, how you doing?
Good. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's awesome time for you to be involved. Obviously, we're post kind of the new year. Physical retail was, or physical in general, it's a trend that I think everyone is tracking post-COVID and probably extending beyond that. You guys just raised another funding round, and I think you guys are a unicorn now. Is that right?
Yes, that was our latest announcement of a week ago.
Nice. So tell us a little bit about Placer AI for those that don't know.
Sure. So Placer is a location data company. If you think in the absolute simplest terms, people vote with their feet. We show you how they vote across the United States to retail locations every single day. We get our data from a panel of 30 million devices throughout the US. This is all anonymized aggregate data, so we are GDPR and CCPA compliant. Now, we're a privacy by design company, so our infrastructure was built to account for these problems at the simplest level. These aren't transitions that we needed to make. We then analyze that data with machine learning and AI algorithms and have estimations to, again, retail locations throughout the United States.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, no, it's informative information always. Now let's kick it off with a couple different key areas and then end it with maybe some of your predictions for the year ahead and potentially beyond that. I don't know where you want to start, whether it's the extended store traffic that at least there's been a lot of commentary around traffic or retail traffic starting earlier in the season, and therefore maybe retail sales numbers we saw last week. There's a lack of seasonality that's actually taking place. So there is no seasonality potentially this year. Anything there? Fitness traffic. Again, Planet Fitness is something we own, but also track pretty regularly. Luxury. is an important industry that we believe reigns supreme and will continue to thrive over the next call it decade. And then again, with that, we'll end with predictions. But any of those categories, where do you want to start?
Sure. So I'll kick off. We'll kind of go in chronological order. So let's start with the end of last year and this extended season. And I think it is, again, not to exaggerate, I think this is the single most important thing we've seen in retail in a very long time. And the reason is we live under the assumption of the customer is always right, and therefore it is the retailer's job to adapt to the customer. But what happened in the holiday season was something very interesting. Retailers were facing a really unique, perfect storm of challenges. So it was supply chain, labor shortages, COVID, right? Those three issues. And they knew those things kind of have a big impact in the traditional structure, which is we're going to have a lot of visits on Black Friday. We're going to have a lot of visits on Super Saturday, and we're going to build our season around that. Add to that the removal of Thanksgiving. So another challenge for many of these retailers. And what they did was communicate effectively with consumers and say, we have these challenges this year. In order for us to be able to give you what you want on time, we all need to shop at off-peak hours. So come earlier, come a little bit, come at different days than you normally would, and you're going to end up with the things you want, and we're going to be able to service you better. And customers bought into that. And we saw visits way up in October, even with Black Friday visits down significantly for many retailers. Take Target. Thanksgiving visits are gone. Black Friday visits are down. Super Saturday visits are way down. Yet November and December visits overall are up because they were able to get visitors to come at different times. And this came without the normal, hey, we're just going to cut costs on everything, because those supply chain issues did raise prices. And that was a really significant moment for retail to recognize that it's not always, all right, how great is your doorbuster deal, or how built are you around a specific day? It's, can you communicate effectively with your audience? And do you have products that people want and love? And I think that was a very, very significant story. And that kind of feeds into what we've seen at the beginning of this year, which is the first week or two of January were really strong because of this return cycle. So much online shopping, lots of visits maybe earlier in the season. You end up, you know what? I don't love what I got, so let me go back in the store. And that visit's really important because it's not just the return. This isn't like a net zero. I give something back and then I either spend the exact same cost. Very often it's I'm bringing something back and I'm already in the store and I like this thing and it's a little bit more. And so for many retailers, I think we're going to see early January as a really significant boost that helps offset some of the challenges that they saw in December. I think when you think about, we talked about luxury. Luxury is one of those sectors that we have an index that tracks a certain number of luxury categories. And I think they've been uniquely well positioned. So, you think about their audience having slightly more disposable income, plus the fact that there's government stimulus, plus the lack of international travel, plus the ability to save a little bit more over the last year and a half, considering the circumstances. And it is a really unique environment for luxury because you have this high intent shopper that has money to spend and that wants to spend it with you. And it's a goods that generally, if I'm going to buy, a really expensive item, I want to touch it and feel it and make sure it's exactly what I want. So I'm going to go to that store to do it, where the conversion rate is higher. And it doesn't come with the same cost of, I'm going to buy it in 3 different sizes, try it on at home, send back 2, and then good luck retailers stomaching those costs. So I think luxury's been really well positioned as well. The one that's really interesting for us is what you kind of mentioned, which is fitness. The fitness sector as a whole, so again, taking in the wider landscape, has been doing much better than expected in the last 6 months. So flirting with 2019 levels, if not above 2019 levels in much of December. Wow. And that was a really strong sign. Now, obviously, COVID is kind of the worst case scenario. Like if you were create something in a lab that would be bad for gyms, it's COVID. But I think even what we're seeing in early January is, and there are declines, it is not on, the 2020 pace, which is what we're comparing to that 2 years prior. But it's not that far off. So you're talking about in some cases 7-8% down from where they were, depending on the chain. And I think Planet Fitness is a great example of one that we still feel really bullish on as a result. And by the way, Blink is another, these kind of value-oriented fitness chains. But even kind of the more, hey, we provide everything, come get on it, whether it's a Soul Cycle or a Lifetime, we feel pretty good about the wider fitness space. And I think there's a couple of reasons why. One, people missed it. Two, they realize that there's this wider mix of things that they're looking to get from a fitness perspective that really orients itself towards what a value chain can provide. So I'll spend $10 a month at Planet Fitness while also having a Soul Cycle subscription and having a treadmill in our home. Even though the narrative for so much of late 2020 and 2021 was Peloton's doing great, goodbye everything else. That's just not how the fitness sector works. We joke there's not a suburban home in America that doesn't have a treadmill covered in laundry or like old boxes. It's not because treadmills aren't great. It's because it's part of the mix. It's not the whole thing. And I think we've seen that with fitness. I think January is going to be a little bit more rough than we would have hoped because of Omicron. I think the real test is going to be late January and February, because if we see those visits continue to go up and go back to those 2020, 2019 levels, well, there'll be a lot of reason for positivity and optimism. In terms of looking forward, I want to break it into two categories, and we'll do it quick. The first is the trends. So when we think about trends, I think there's three that are really important. One is the regression to the norm, right? So for brands that were doing incredibly well during the pandemic because of those circumstances, expect them to fade back. And those that were getting hammered, like in AMC theaters, expect them to start trending back to where they were. And it's an important context for how we understand performance. This isn't a brand that is all of a sudden doing terribly just because their comp to 2020, when things were perfectly oriented for them, has gone away. It's just kind of this regression. And we need those year over 2 year, in some cases year over 3 year comparisons to give us that context. The other element is kind of right sizing and what we mean by this term. So we're seeing a lot of brands that are lowering their footprint in order to be more optimized. So take a CVS. CVS has seen visits crush during the pandemic, and especially in the last year. The fact that they're dropping stores is because they realize they don't need as many to serve their audience, especially with their shift towards more in-store services. And I think that's something we're going to see from a lot of brands. This isn't about closing stores for the sake of closing stores or closing stores because this is a lower performer. It's going to be about, how do I reach the same audience with a more optimized fleet? And I think we're going to see other brands that are expanding because they don't have enough reach. So take a Dollar General with Pop Shelf or others. And even different concepts. So like a Bloomingdale's launching a Bloomies, it's a right-sizing effort in order to reach audiences that their current format doesn't enable them to get close enough to. And think as another example, think of a Sephora coming into a Kohl's or an Ulta coming into a Target. It's right-sizing in the sense of, how do I utilize different formats to reach different audiences and different places to give myself the most optimized reach of the people I want to get close to. And I think it's something that's a really important theme for the coming year. In terms of retails, I want to do one obvious, the one that's going to succeed. I want to do one that's kind of like a medium, let's call it, and a third that's a higher risk in terms of like, what do we expect? On the obvious category, I think it's Target, right? Target is constantly investing in where they think the retail world is going. They have a unique level of understanding of who their audience is. And it's an audience that most retailers don't get. And it's the middle. How do you have an audience that at the one time, Apple is a product that they'll buy, which is a more expensive product, but at the same time, they want to save money on socks. So this idea that we're going to have someone who really gets that middle and the nuance of how to reach them is something that's super significant and going to give the brand a lot of success in the coming year from our perspective. When we think about a medium, think about like a Kohl's. Kohl's did not have the greatest year last year. I think there was a lot of reasons why, but they're really well positioned for what's coming. And a big part of that is their willingness to invest in innovative ideas like Sephora in Kohl's. We actually see those locations outperforming standard Kohl's locations. So these ideas that they have of how to expand, how to refresh, how to do their department model differently seem to be working, and they should be generating a lot of excitement. When we think about the high risk, I'll include two that are less popular here. One is kind of Tuesday Morning and Bed Bath & Beyond, just because of how well positioned that home furnishing sector is. When we think about how visits are coming back, the way they're looking to optimize their fleet, it's a really awesome opportunity for these brands to catch fire or to do a lot better than expected. Again, this is in terms of how they're doing in terms of visits to those locations. We expect pretty strong things from them, at least to outperform what's maybe expected. And the last one is Staples. So you think look at Staples visits over the last year. Obviously, they were down compared to 2019, but that started to flatten out and, in fact, outperform 2019. And granted, there were some closures, but there is a feeling like they have found the right mix. If they can figure out how to take advantage of this work from home model, the fact that it's showing some sustainability, the return of office, and their role in between those two places, I think there's a lot of promise for Staples specifically and that wider office sector, even with the omnipresence of Amazon looking forward. And that's our look back and kind of our look forward as well.
Yeah, no, super interesting. I think we have a couple more minutes here that will, I'll just ask a couple quick questions. So in the fitness category, what are you seeing? More consolidation? Are you seeing, obviously Planet Fitness just pre-announced 15.2 million members for the upcoming quarter or prior quarter. And again, is there consolidation there? I know 30%, roughly 30% of gyms closed. And it makes sense for the low-cost leader to kind of continue to take share, and they've kind of expressed that. But in your data at Placer AI, what are you guys seeing?
I mean, exactly that. They're just we've been talking about this since the start of 2020. They're really some of these gyms are closing. By the way, large chains to kind of smaller gyms, and that Planet Fitness, because of their reach, because of their model, they're really well situated to take in visits from a lot of different places. And this kind of Peloton workout at home individual, the idea to have a $10 membership for Planet Fitness as well is not this crazy concept. So I do think that kind of value model fitness chain is going to be in really high demand. That said, I think we're going to see a strong year for the wider space.
Sure. Yeah, no, makes sense. I actually have a Peloton. I have a Planet Fitness membership for whenever I travel, and then a local gym membership for my actual day-to-day. So it's definitely this combo that is in my life. Ethan, look, I appreciate you coming on. As always, it's always a good conversation. You guys have some of the best data out there. Congrats on the $1 billion valuation. And yeah, I hope to see you in the future and speak again. And again, thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Sean. It was a pleasure to be here.
All right, so that was Ethan from Placer. Interesting conversation as always. Again, we utilize their data and resources to try to best understand what's going on in the physical world. I think the kind of two quick highlights is obviously physical fitness in the physical world is coming back. The extended store traffic, people starting earlier in the season. I think this past year and the year prior, seasonality is just simply out of whack. So seeing all these retail sales and some of the figures, I think it's a little hard to construct what's exactly going on. But I think the key takeaway is that consumers started much earlier. Luxury continues to reign supreme. And then some of the predictions that he had in terms of companies like Target versus like a company like Kohl's. So interesting conversation. We'll have him again at some point. Now, I wanted to spin to the next conversation, which is with one of our favorites, Duolingo. We have the CFO from Duolingo that will join us here shortly. So I wanted to welcome Duolingo and Matt, the CFO, onto the event. How you doing, Matt?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, thanks for taking some time out of your day to share kind of some of the exciting things that are happening there. We're big believers in kind of democratizing education, and what way is better than offering kind of this free, low-cost subscription with clear goals and importantly, I think clear outcomes. Just to level set real quick for yourself is Chief Financial Officer. You came to Duolingo. You had 15 years of finance and operations experience, I guess most recently as a senior member of Goldman Sachs Investment Partners. That's as far as I'll go in your journey. But in general, again, thanks for coming on. If you could just quickly maybe talk about yourself, Luis, the CEO, founder, and then also summarize kind of the product and company.
Yeah, no, very happy to. You did a great job introducing me. I don't think I need to talk more about myself, but I will talk about Luis and the product, and they go hand in hand. So Luis, our founder and CEO, is from Guatemala, and he learned English, and he believes it fundamentally changed his life to do so. It led him to Duke University and then to Carnegie Mellon, where he created really lasting products. One of them is CAPTCHA and reCAPTCHA. He was the inventor of those things as well. And so he decided that the next challenge he wanted to do was to give education, the best education in the world, to as many people as he could. And so he founded Duolingo to do that. And our mission, which is where the product really, the product vision really starts, is to make education, the best education in the world, universally available. That's why we have a product that, as you mentioned, is free. You can learn from 0 to very high level proficiency on Duolingo without paying us anything. You have to consume some ads along the way, but that's about it. And so that's the raw product vision that he has, is to make education universally available. One thing you'll notice about our mission, though, is it's not language learning. That's not in the title. It's education. So we started with language learning because it's something that was near and dear to Luis's heart, and a way to impact a ton of people over around the world. But that's not where we'll stop. That's just the start of it.
Got it. And yeah, to expand on that topic, simply talk about the different products that you do offer.
Yeah, happy to. So right now, the main product is the language learning app, which I'm sure some folks are familiar with. So that's where you can learn 40 different languages. We have 101 different courses. And that product monetizes in a couple ways. So we have ads, which make up about 15% of our revenue. We have IAP, in-app purchases, which make up 1 to 2%. And then about 70+% from our subscription service called Duolingo Plus. So if you want to learn the language with less interruptions, so no advertising and no pacing mechanism. So we have a mechanic called hearts, which is a lot like lives in a video game. If you want to not have those things, you pay us a monthly or annual subscription fee, and that's our Duolingo Plus product, which again is about 70% plus of our revenue. And then the last product that we're monetizing right now is a high stakes English proficiency test called the Duolingo English Test, which competes with the likes of TOEFL and IELTS. And that helps you prove to colleges and universities around the world that English well enough to attend school. Luis, again, took this test. He took the TOEFL, I believe. He had to travel, I think, across country lines to take it. And so his vision for this product was to make high stakes proficiency testing much easier. So you take it on a laptop, you can usually take it in under an hour, and it costs a quarter of what the competitors charge.
Got it. Yeah, so definitely a broader portfolio of products, and I know there's stuff in the future that you've talked about at Duocon in terms of things like math and other product offerings that could be similar in terms of how you learn on your English or language app. I was asked yesterday on a radio show, basically just in general, what separates Duolingo, and one of the things that came to mind was obviously the gamification aspect of it. And another thing that came to mind was, okay, you take sales and marketing is roughly like 20+%, and then you have R&D, which is like 40% of spend, and it's really that engineering component, that focus on R&D, that I think is somewhat of makes you guys different than potentially other companies or what people think of you. Talk about engineering. I think the focus, I think you've expressed publicly on your website, is 45% of the workforce is engineers. What should we take away from that emphasis on the engineer for an education company?
Yeah, well, so you're right about the numbers. I mean, we've disclosed publicly in the S1 and on the website that engineering makes up a huge swath of our employee base, and then if you expand that to the product, so engineers, product managers, and designers, it's approaching 70% of our employees are focused on that. That's not only does it differentiate us in the marketplace, but it's really behind the ethos of the company. So one of the things that was a central insight to Duolingo was that when you're learning on a mobile device, we're competing against language learning apps for sure, but really against things that are taking your attention, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, these type of things. And so the hardest part is actually about learning on your own is staying motivated. You have to stay engaged. Otherwise, no learning can take place. And so that's part of the gamification route that we went. It's part of why the entire brand is around delight. We're trying to make it a delightful experience that people want to come back to so that they can learn. And in order to do that, we have found that marketing is important, don't get us wrong. But the most important thing is making sure that we have a bunch of people, engineers mainly, and product designers and managers who are running experiments to try to figure out how to make it more engaging, more efficacious, and more fun all the time. Our engineers run hundreds of A/B tests a quarter to run experiments, like little things like changing text sizes and purchase flow items, as well as changing when you do verb conjugation for certain courses, right? So we're just running tests all the time to make the product all the more fun and engaging. And so that's why we need so many engineers and product designers, and we're happy to spend huge amounts of our gross profit and invest in R&D so that we can do that. It kind of also doubles for us a bit as acquisition costs. And the reason I say that is if you build a delightful, engaging, fun product, people are going to talk about it. You're going to become part of the zeitgeist, and you're going to acquire users that way. And that's the predominant way we do acquire users. And so, like I said, we've said publicly we're planning on spending a lot of money on R&D in the future as well.
Great. I guess going forward, stepping into kind of math, you spoke at DualCon around math. Why do you think math is something that you believe fits Duolingo as a product offering?
Not to sound like a broken record, but Luis is a mathematician, right? So he loves math. I think a lot of the engineers in the company love math. That's not really the reason we're going into it, although it certainly helps. The reason we think that we started with literacy, which is our ABC product, which we launched during the pandemic, in part to help parents who are trying to manage children at home, give them a nice app so they could feel good about their kids on the tablet or phone learning something. But literacy, math, things like this require repetition, just like language learning. Language learning acquisition requires you to repeat certain things over and over again until they become ingrained and you learn them. And it also, the core of Duolingo's artificial intelligence and machine learning capabilities is the personalization engine we have. Before I go into math, just to let you know, like when I took my Duolingo lesson this morning, I'm learning Spanish. And I think Duolingo thinks I'm pretty good at nouns, and they think I'm pretty not good at verb conjugation. So I get a lot of verb conjugation practice. And if you were, at the same level as I am, but we're a little bit better at conjugation, a little bit less good at nouns, you get a different lesson. And that personalization is something that we think can extend across, a bunch of categories. So when you look across the world, literacy and math are just natural extensions of things that can be personalized and can be repeated, so that people can come back and learn them quickly and efficiently. So Luis is on record publicly of saying he's really excited about math and wants to launch something this year. So we'll see. He's hopeful about that. No one knows the future on it, but hopefully.
For sure. Yeah, and then going to the English test. So this was something that was fairly small as from a line item in the business. It felt like pre-COVID. Then the adoption became enormous over the last several years. I think you went from like 13,000 tests taken just before COVID to 300,000 to I guess one of the latest conferences talking about 50% growth in that number this year. Just talk about one, who does it compete with? You talked about it a little bit before, but how does this ultimately add credibility to the language learning app side of the equation as well?
Totally. I think that question is spot on, just in where you're going in terms of credibility. The goal for the DET is obviously to provide people with high stakes testing options. It's to grow it. It's to be a big business. That's obvious. Your point around credibility, Luis tells the story right now that if you ask someone on this call who knows another language what level they're at, the most likely answers are beginning, intermediate, or fluent. Well, first of all, 3 gradations is not super finely tuned. And also, like, what does it even mean? Like, if someone tells you they're intermediate in French, does that mean they took 2 years in high school? Does it mean they studied in college? Did they, live and work in France for a while and they're truly intermediate? And so the long-term strategic view of having a testing capability is to ultimately integrate it into the app, such that when you tell someone that you know how to speak French, your answer is not intermediate. I'm a Duolingo 95, or I'm a Duolingo 75. And there's kind of a lingua franca, to pun a little bit here, on what it means to have language proficiency. And so that's how, like, the ultimate vision of it is to bring these things together, which is teaching the language and assessing the language. We think that would be a very powerful, strategic endpoint for this. In the short term, we're not there yet. I've not heard anyone really refer to their language proficiency yet by a Duolingo score yet. But in the short term, this test, which I mentioned before, competes with companies like the TOEFL or the IELTS that have testing centers where you go and you take a test. And the innovation with the DET was that you could kind of use the front-facing camera of most laptops with some artificial intelligence and some software that locks people out of doing other things on their laptop to do this test online. You don't need to go to a center, and you can charge less for it. You can make it more convenient for the students. You can access more students who otherwise wouldn't be able to take the test. And so we're really excited about the DET. We think it's a great product that's just completely aligned with the strategy.
Right. Yeah, no, it makes sense. Shifting to content, again, there's a lot of talk about here. You hired Linda Szyminski, I guess, from PBS. And I'll read from kind of a headline. So she'll help to spearhead the company's push into original content featuring the app's cast of characters. Her purview includes original animation writing for the Duolingo Stories, Fictional Tales, and Duolingo ABC. My son plays that every single night, 108 straight. So wow, there's something there. Yeah, Timothy Shea, your VP of Studios and Content, told Fast Company that you are trying to create Sesame Street for grown-ups. He added what you just said before. Our competition isn't other language learning apps. It's things like YouTube and Netflix. Just speaks to what you were talking about. Just how do you think about content in general? The Sesame Street for grown-ups. I know that's kind of a playful way of maybe talking about it, but in general, content with your characters, you have a pretty good following on TikTok and other outlets that suggest there is this kind of affinity and attraction for the characters and Duo himself.
Everyone loves Duo. They really do. He's great. He's a TikTok star, that Duo. He's been fantastic. I think Linda is just another example of us believing that in order to achieve our aspirations of really providing awesome education globally, we have to be a trusted brand. And to be a trusted brand, you have to do right by your customers, like offering them free products that are just as good as the paid products, for example. That's kind of a very core element of it. But then it's also being fun and engaging and delightful. And if you think about Sesame Street, boy, what a trusted brand. And so it's more than just being Sesame Street for adults, although I think that's a great turn of phrase. It's how do you kind of continue to delight and engage people around the world in your brand so that you continue to be trusted and beloved. The fan art on Instagram and TikTok for Duo and for now the characters, to your point, shows that there is real trust there is real loyalty and affinity. And so Linda's going to help us extend that in a bunch of really exciting ways that I'm personally excited to see, given that I grew up on Sesame Street. So the Duolingo World characters, just to bring it back to her, is that's one way to extend the brand. So Duo is associated with language learning, and Duo will always be associated with us in all aspects of what we do. But the characters are now part of the app. They're part of the stories. And it gives us just extensions. They have their own personalities. They have their own fan art. They have their own affinity groups. It's just a great way to, just to continue to extend the brand and make sure that people trust us and love us.
Yeah, got it. To kind of further that and a couple more questions here, but basically the part of like the present culture. Again, I alluded to the TikTok following, which is you're one of the most followed TikTok accounts, and I think you've expressed that zero marketing dollars or very little marketing dollars went into that. Now, also, it's also known that you saw a bump in terms of usage or downloads due to Squid Games from Netflix, as people wanted to try to learn certain languages. We know more of that is coming in terms of Netflix has stated that, and more dub shows. That's not going away anytime soon. What's kind of your overall thoughts, and how do you view that type of trend that's taking place and kind of take advantage of it?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there are a lot of people who love our TikTok around the world. I love our TikTok because it's awesome. And like, to your point, we haven't spent money on it. So as a CFO, I'm excited about that return on investment. Our general counsel also seems to love TikTok since he appears in some of them, which is awesome. But to bring it back to more brass tacks, Duolingo has always acquired a ton of users organically. In the first 7 or 8 years of the business's existence, it spent a cumulative amount of less than $15 million on marketing, not per year, but like over the course of those 7 or 8 years. And again, this just goes back to being a delightful brand. We wanted people to talk about our brand and tell their friends. And that's how we grew, and that's how we continue to grow. We love the fact that we acquire a bunch of users, the vast majority organically. TikTok is another way to do that. Squid Games is another way to do that. That's just how we think about our growth. We think about levers that we can pull to put us into the cultural conversation, to acquire users organically. We were on SNL, I think a couple times, without, with them just deciding that we were the language learning app that they were going to use to make jokes about whatever they were making jokes about. So that's a great strength of ours, and it's one we want to continue to build on with our brand.
Got it. Yeah, makes sense. Duolingo Plus, just speaking a little bit about financials somewhat here. But in general, Duolingo Plus, kind of tell us the uptake there. Where do you see that going as a percent of users? And again, you've talked about potentially getting dating apps and things like that. But and then lastly, how are you guys thinking about balancing profits against kind of this opportunity at hand? Sure. And then your balance sheet today.
Yeah. All right. Well, those are a lot of questions. I'll take a deep breath and try to get through all of them really quickly. So I know we're almost at time. So in terms of Duolingo Plus, that's, like I mentioned, 70+% of our revenue, our main monetization angle. A bunch of folks like investors and the general public want to know how high we can take our penetration rate of our own users, how much of them can become subscribers. So our subscriber to MAU ratio is one numerical estimate of that. It's gone about up a point a year for the past couple of years. So 3 to 4 now. I think the most recent publicly stated number was 5.5% penetration. Dating apps are in the 15% range. I think people ask us, what do we think that number can get to? And the answer is we don't know. We don't know a number. We weren't the first language learning app. We weren't the first mobile app. And we're not the first app to kind of monetize its user base through subscription. So those are good guideposts. We just like the trend. So we're pretty happy about it because it's a trend that's driven by us improving the product and convincing more of our users that we're worth them subscribing. So no idea how high that penetration rate goes, but just we like the trend. In terms of the balance sheet and liquidity and balancing growth and profit, we think we have a huge market, a great runway, and we think we're kind of a category defining product. And so we think there's a ton of growth to be had. And so we've never been a company that's relied on a ton of external funding to burn through capital to acquire users. So it's always been run relatively disciplined. If you look at our cash flow for the past couple of years and our profitability, it's very close to break even, cash flow positive. And so we would continue to be disciplined about it. But if we have the opportunity to grow faster, we're going to continue to push our pedal down on the growth. And we went public last year and now have $500+ million on the balance sheet. to think about interesting avenues for growth. So that would be our priority.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I think that's where we'll stop. Look, I appreciate you coming on. We're pretty excited about the Duolingo story. It's hard to find kind of education, growth, profits, and everything wrapped up in one. And you guys have a strong lead in the category, it seems. And yeah, again, I appreciate you coming on and sharing some of the insights around the company, and good luck in the future.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me. Take care.
All right, Matt. Yeah, so that was Duolingo. Interesting, obviously, product story, vision, the balancing of, again, profits and free cash flow positive recently. Here's a story that we think, again, in an inflationary environment that some people have expressed these days. I mean, there's nothing more deflationary than free. And then talk about a subscription story that's attached to this in the infancy of that journey, and new products coming on the horizon. So more on that. Now, I wanted to turn to our next guest. Golf Plus VR, Oculus is all the rage these days, and Golf Plus is benefiting from this. It's a cool product. We have Ryan, and I wanted to welcome him to the event now and talk about his story and everything that's going on at Golf Plus.
Hey,
Ryan,
Sean.
how you doing? What's going
Doing
on?
great. Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, so yeah, thanks for coming on and just and coming to tell your story. Obviously, you founded Golf Plus VR. Make sure I add the VR on there. The game is currently listed in kind of one of the top selling categories. I got promoted that even before reaching out to you, and played my first 18 or first 9 and hit the driving range a couple of times. So it's a pretty cool experience overall. So congratulations on the success, and just giving us more insights into your product, Oculus, and everything that's going on.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. So yeah, I've personally been a golfer since I was 11. My dad got me into the game, and then I started writing code when I was 12 or 13. So those two things just kind of aligned really well to now be building what we consider to be, kind of the golf metaverse and really the next iteration of golf. And yeah, our mission as a company is truly to grow the game of golf. We think we can do that by not only creating a bunch of new VR golfers, but just growing the entire space as a whole. Golf's a very high friction activity, and our guess is that if we can make it more accessible and get people addicted to it by playing in VR, they're a lot more likely to play on the real course as well. So that's been really cool. And Oculus just happened to create kind of the ultimate device that we needed to make golf possible in VR. We tried playing it prior with, a tether attached to your computer. And it turns out when you're doing a golf swing, that tether can be pretty tricky. So having a standalone device like the Oculus Quest has made the experience a lot better.
Got it. Talk about the game itself. Like the experience that somebody jumps on, and what do they experience there?
Totally. So yeah, we do have a couple partners. So we're partnered with Topgolf, and we're partnered with the PGA. And right when you get into the game, we wanted to make you feel like you're at a golf resort. So we have kind of this nice clubhouse. We have a voiceover and an onboarding experience. You're on a driving range, and right from the get-go, we explain. You play with one controller. It's a 1-to-1 with how you swing a normal golf club. So should be very intuitive. And as soon as you get through onboarding and learn the basic controls, you can immediately hop onto an 18-hole golf course. We have 3 golf courses. One of them is a fantasy course that we created, and the other 2 are real courses in the real world. One is Wolf Creek in Mesquite, Nevada. It's kind of one of the coolest golf courses out there, crazy elevation change in the middle of the desert. It's featured in a lot of other golf games, including like the old Tiger Woods games. And then our other course is Valhalla, which is owned by the PGA and has hosted major championship tournaments there. It's hosted the Ryder Cup in the past. It's a Jack Nicklaus design course. So it's in Louisville, Kentucky, and it's just a very cool, well-designed course with lots of trees and some water. And we're in the process of finalizing some additional licensing deals with other real-world courses. And, ultimately our goal is to have every course ever built in the world in VR and playable.
Wow. So technology-wise, talk to me about how you get that in the game. and so that we can experience it as if it's real in the real world?
Yeah, so it's a process of getting survey data. So thankfully, most golf courses have been surveyed at some point, either via sort of national survey or privately, including like flying drones over the course and getting photogrammetry data. And then there are also companies that send laser scanners over there and scan the greens to make them incredibly accurate, so that they can print out these books that pros use to prepare before a tournament or even during play. So there's a lot of 3D data out there. And then, stuff like Google Maps, Google Earth, photographs that the course already has in order to get all the bushes in the right place, all the trees in the right place, everything like that. Lots of satellite imagery, staring at the course, watching YouTube videos of people who go out there and do, course vlogs. And then a bunch, artist work in Unity, basically creating a 3D version of that course and ensuring we have the fairways in the right spots and the tee boxes in the right spots, and looking at the course data to see where they put the pin positions in some cases, reaching out to the course to ask them questions about, certain layouts that we have, we have questions about that aren't clear. It's really just, digitizing the real world as closely as we can.
Yeah, it's incredible. Talk about the VR, like challenges to technology-wise to build in VR, because obviously, as you think of VR, it's a network effect, right? More users come in, the more money in theory that VR developers have the ability to develop, and then more intellectual property can come in as well in terms of like licensing and things like that. So like as both sides gets bigger and stronger. So talk about the challenges to build for VR, so we can get a context of kind of how fast the adoption of developers coming into the platform could occur, I guess.
Yeah, there are a bunch of challenges. Some of the sort of more design technical challenges are the fact that, you're in 3D. The person using VR can be looking anywhere. They could be looking behind them, even though you want them to be looking at the menu right in front of them. So you have to have a lot of like audio cues and even visual cues to make sure that the player's actually looking where you want them to look. That's like kind of more on the design side of things. From a business perspective, I think you kind of nailed it. It's still a new market. It's growing very quickly, but the numbers are nowhere even close to console or mobile. And when someone's in VR, they're kind of locked into it, right? They don't have their phone. They can't see their computer. So when you're in VR, it can be more difficult to kind of communicate or look up what you should be doing if you're getting stuck. And then I think the other big thing from kind of just the design perspective as well is there's no real interface guidelines yet. Oculus is still kind of experimenting with interfaces that they think are going to work. Every game has their own sort of different interface. They don't have like that Apple human interface guideline. This is how an app works. This is where the nav goes. This is where the footer goes. This is how the back button works. It's still kind of Wild West out there. So every experience is a little different, and you have to do a lot of hand holding with your players to make sure that they understand how to play the game. Our game skews a little bit older. It's golf, right? So it does skew a little bit older, which means that we're even more likely to have some sort of less technical people checking it out. And
Interesting.
We try to get people on Discord. We try to get people to send us emails if they get stuck. And it's an ongoing process, really, to just make sure that people are aware of the controls and how everything works.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So talk about the last, I'd say 2 months. And the adoption or trends you've seen, obviously in the game and Golf Plus, and then also Oculus in general. I guess they kind of go hand in hand for yourself, but just trends. What have you witnessed?
Yeah, the last 2 months have been insane for us because we launched Golf Plus 2 months ago. We had, we prior it was called Top Golf with Pro Putt, and then Pro Putt by Top Golf before that. So we had a bit of a user base, but over the last 2 months, like our game basically doubled in size, even though it had been out for almost a year and a half prior. This last Christmas was about 5 or 6 times as large as year's Christmas or the Christmas before. So we're just seeing crazy numbers, crazy growth. Thankfully, our average time in game since we launched Golf Plus is about 3 times as much time in game as it was before. So we're seeing, you know, kind of great stickiness, great retention so far. And the coolest thing is people playing it and then telling us that they got their friends to buy a Quest to play it as well. And we've heard this from other devs too. It's not totally unique to us. But it does feel like we're at that moment where there are enough really good experiences out there and enough new people trying it, where when they try it, they immediately want to share it with a friend, get their friend to buy it. And there are a lot of social experiences that allow, you know, friends to hang out together and play golf or play ping pong or basketball. And it really does feel like it's becoming, you know, a great social experience, especially while we're all still, you know, somewhat limited in terms of travel and, you know, working from home or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, so let's talk about Oculus for a second. There's this narrative out there that is really around the fact that potentially developers, I think I sent you the article the other day, which was really a negative view of the Oculus developer ecosystem, and developers were not that happy. We've heard different from a ton of developers. What's your initial take on, again, not on the negative side, but just in general, what's your views of Oculus as a platform and how they treat their developers?
Yeah, I mean, Oculus has saved VR hands down, no questions asked. Like, 100% no way would our business be operating right now if they hadn't launched the Quest, if they hadn't pioneered the entire standalone market, if they hadn't priced it in a way that would get, you know, rumor is 10 million units sold last year. That's been a game changer for our business, and we can afford to grow and keep bringing golf, you know, into the metaverse. As soon as there's another platform that's out there that has compelling hardware and you know, some decent user numbers, we 100% plan on porting the game to that and building new features that take advantage of any new hardware. We fully believe in competition, but right now I think we just have to be honest that there is no competition, because the Oculus Quest 2 is just, you know, head and shoulders above, and they don't really have any real competition because they just created such an incredible piece of hardware. And just in terms of how they've treated us, one thing that's been great is our company is, when we launched Golf Plus, was like a team of 5, right? So we're a tiny company, and Oculus gives us access to new features to test out. And then we get to talk to their team about our experience with them. We were one of the first to implement their avatar system. And based on our feedback to them, we saw them make some real changes to the avatar system before rolling it out to more devs. So from our personal experience with them, they're incredibly receptive. The people on their team care deeply about the space and the, you know, the hardware or the software that they're working on. And everyone there has treated us with a ton of respect and made us feel like valued partners. So it's been a great experience. I will say, having friends that, you know, are in App Lab or aren't in the proper store, I do hope that Oculus is able to make the path more clear for new developers to understand how you can go from, you know, VR concept to actually being in the proper app store, because it is difficult for App Lab games to, you know, get the exposure that we get in the store. We got lucky to be accepted into the store early. And I'm hoping that it, you know, the process to get into the store is made more clear.
Got it. That makes sense. And then talk about so building for consumers or even like a commercial utility here as it relates to like swing coaches training. How are you guys thinking about that futuristically?
Yeah, when we first started prototyping VR, we actually thought being a training aid was the way to go. We connected the controller to a putter and it felt really good, and we created a little analysis tool and it worked really well. But the problem was convincing golfers that it did work, and the only way to do that was to put them in VR, and that's asking a lot. So we decided to focus pretty much exclusively on consumers and build something that would be fun. And having the mission to grow the game of golf, we recognized that we have to build something that attracts new people to the sport, not just people that are already into the sport. So right now we're pretty focused on consumers, but we have had quite a few coaches reach out to ask about training in VR because they feel like it's a great way to expand their offering. So I'm hoping later this year we'll have some new features available where coaches are able to give private virtual lessons.
That's interesting. Yeah, I could see that. I mean, I was on some other apps in terms of fitness, just some of the technology is pretty incredible that you can, I mean, in some ways, it's not real life, but at the same time, it feels pretty real in some ways. Last couple questions. I mean, when you hear the term metaverse, how do you see Golf Plus as like a player in that space? And just metaverse, like how do you define it? And Golf Plus as like a constituent in the space.
Yeah, I guess right now my definition is it's kind of evolving. I don't think anyone has a great definition, or at least I haven't heard one that has totally nailed it. But the way I look at it is like there's the internet, and what made the internet really powerful was the web. And the web was a visual 2D interface to the internet, right? The web allows individuals to create web pages, then you can link web pages together. And now you have this content that's very easy to consume as a human because you're visually able to see it with pictures and eventually movies and all of this stuff, right? And the metaverse is effectively the 3D VR spatial version of the web. That's how I see it. So it's a virtual interface to the internet. The information's still on the internet, but now it's accessible in a way that's much closer to how I'm looking at my desk right now, how you and I would look at each other at a coffee shop or whatever, than the web, which is, just 2D. So the way that we look at it is we want to be that interface for golfers. Anytime you want to play golf, talk to your friends about golf, watch golf tournaments, book tee times, or, check out new clubs and equipment, you're going into the golf metaverse, and you're doing that in the same way you'd go to a golf resort or go to a golf pro shop or go to a golf course. So we believe that we can create kind of a spatial virtual interface to golf that's very consistent and allows you to do all the things that you would want to do golf related. So we've kind of leaned into this metaverse notion and terminology, and the way that we're framing it is we are building the metaverse for golf.
Got it. Last question before you go, I have to ask. So Topgolf, PGA, obviously these are physical companies, physical world, looking at you as potentially a strategic partner, obviously depending on what it is, formally, but in general, what do you think they see futuristically in Golf Plus? And yourself and the company that you're building, that excites them enough to like really lean in on virtual reality, metaverse type concepts?
Frankly, I think the number one thing they see is that our team, and especially me, are very persistent, so we wouldn't stop talking to them about it. So that really helped. And then we've just been pretty consistent at delivering some results and showing them demos of the experience and what we think it can be. And I think they're seeing the growth in VR as a whole. And I think, having used our experience and kind of seeing how it's evolved over time, this is going to be a really big deal, and people are engaging with it. And both of those companies are extremely dedicated to growing the game of golf. And I think they recognize that, traditional golf's not going away, but it's also not necessarily the warmest way to get people into the game. Topgolf's done a great job of exposing more and more people to swinging golf clubs and hitting balls and seeing how fun that is. And we're hoping to do the same thing in VR, is to just give people a taste of what it's like to actually get out on the golf course without having to buy the equipment and take lessons and do all the things necessary to play for real.
Awesome. Ryan, look, I appreciate you coming on, and congrats on all the success for sure. I'm one of your subscribers. So I'll keep playing, and looking forward to some of the new courses coming out. But I, again, appreciate you coming on, and good luck.
Thanks so much, Sean. Appreciate being here.
Yeah, so that was Ryan, the founder of Golf Plus. Obviously, like thinking deeper about kind of what's going on in the metaverse and virtual reality. I think it's an interesting conversation to have. They've seen explosive growth. We've seen that around many of the players that built the right games and really at the right time. Oculus, in terms of app downloads, and we'll talk to Sensor Tower later. You're seeing explosive, somewhat exponential growth in the app itself. So that was a good conversation with Ryan, and we'll look forward to talking to him in the future and seeing how much more success he's had. Now we're going to turn to Nutanix, and Nutanix is a transformation story for us. It's one that we've historically been excited about in terms of that transformation that's taking place. And we're going to have the team there come and speak about some of the stuff that they are doing and explain the story. So happy to have Richard from Nutanix come join the event. How you doing, Richard?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
No, thank you for joining. So you're at Nutanix now, but you spent 23 years as an equity analyst at Needham. So I think this puts you in a pretty constructive place to tell the story. This is much more of an analyst story as opposed to even a product and user story, as I believe, again, net promoter scores for your product are outstanding. The people that use your product love it, JetBlue, Home Depot, and some others, according to the site. So welcome and thanks for coming on again. So a little bit about the Nutanix story, if you could just tell us, walk us through the company, where you guys are today, the transformation. I know it's been a couple, the product first, then the economic model. And in many cases, this is hard for most analysts and people to understand. So just walk us through the company and where you are today.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the setup, Sean. So yeah, I mean, Nutanix has undergone a number of transformations or transitions over its life cycle as both a private and public company. We came public in 2016, via IPO. So we've really transitioned, I'd say, around three major vectors. One is business model, two is the product portfolio, and three is our go-to-market. So just quickly to hit on those 3 points. On the business model side, we went from initially selling an appliance, which was bundled software and hardware, to fairly quickly getting the hardware out of our model and becoming really hardware independent and moving to essentially perpetual software model, which we called life of device. And then a couple of years later, we transitioned to a subscription model, realizing that having a subscription model and having that renewal part of the business was just going to be a much better business model. So we're well down that subscription transition now. Over 90% of our business is in fact subscription, and we're starting to see the benefit of renewals, which come at a much lower cost than new business, and add predictability and actually a growth lever to the model. So we're just starting to beginning to see the benefits of that in the form of re-accelerating top line and improving leverage in the bottom line. But we think there's a lot more to go there. Then to move to the other vectors, product portfolio, we started out really pioneering the hyperconverged infrastructure category, our HCI product called AOS. And then over time, it's kind of an innovation-driven company, founder-led company. We expanded our portfolio to over 15 products. And the problem was there was a lot of probably too much independence in these products, both in R&D and in go-to-market, and really not the efficiency or probably the benefit from a solution perspective that we think our customers needed. So we've undergone a transition to really more of a solution-based portfolio where we're converging a lot of these products into 5 core solutions, simplifying them from both the pricing, packaging, and delivery to the end customer, making them easier for us to sell them, for our partners to help us sell them, and for customers to consume them. So that's kind of the solutions part of it, which we're in the middle of right now. And the other part I'd say was in go-to-market, as a kind of pioneering sort of innovative company, the initial go-to-market model was very much kind of go it alone. There wasn't a lot of partnerships. And I think we've pivoted hard towards embracing partners, particularly strategic partners. And we can talk a little bit more about this later, but such as Red Hat and Citrix and HPE, and really forming these mutually beneficial relationships where we can both get incremental sort of go-to-market leverage from each other due to the complementary sort of nature of our products. So those are kind of the transitions we've gone through, and that's kind of what brings us to where we are today with a software model that's 90% plus subscription, is seeing nicely accelerating top line, and is seeing a pretty sharply improving bottom line as well.
Got it. No, that makes a lot of sense. So again, transition, which again creates a kind of a foggy story and maybe a dislocation in what's going on in the day-to-day of public equity markets per se. Now,
fair enough.
Talk to us about the product offering, as if you would to a third grader. What is the product? Why do they use it?
Sure. I'm not sure if I'll pass the third grader test, but I'll do my best. So essentially, our product makes it easier and less expensive to run your apps in a cloud, whether that's a private cloud sort of on-prem or a public cloud, AWS, Azure, et cetera. So that's the core premise of what we do. And to take a step, sort of drill down a little bit into that, we pioneered this category of infrastructure called hyperconverged infrastructure, or HCI. And essentially what that did it converged the three main elements of a data center, that being compute, storage, and networking, combined them with a software-defined layer, made it really easy to deploy and scale and manage them. Whereas historically, they were kind of three silos that had to be managed and scaled independently. We really converged them with this software layer, software stack, if you will, made it much easier to scale and manage them, really saving our customers a lot of time and making the data center much more kind of with the scalability and economics of a public cloud data center. And sort of the second sort of generation of our platform really looks to do something similar in terms of breaking down silos, but really amongst clouds. So we want to make it sort of one-click simple to move your workloads from your on-prem private cloud to any public cloud, whether that be Azure or AWS. So really kind of making this hybrid multi-cloud platform very simple to manage and making it very easy to move workloads across these different clouds. That's kind of the current vision and thrust of the company.
No, it makes sense. Obviously, again, I think the concept that has always revolved around simplicity, and creating a much simpler solution in some cases is somewhat chaotic, and bringing that again into one, or as easy as you can make it into one control plane, if you will. Now let's talk about leadership. Rajiv, what he brings to the table. He came from VMware, and what he brings to the table to lead Nutanix.
Yeah, great question. Right. So we have, I'm not going to say quite new CEO, Rajiv Ramaswamy's been on board for just over a year. And just maybe I'll take a step back first and say our founder and former CEO, Dheeraj Pandey, he was basically a pioneer and an innovator. He really created this HCI category, and it takes a certain kind of visionary to do that. So credit to him. He founded the company, created a category, did a lot of innovation over the first many years of the company's life. And as I said, maybe in some ways too much innovation or spread too broadly, trying to maybe do too many things. And so for the next phase of the company's life, I think what the company really needed was an operator, someone who had profitably scaled a software business and maybe done that multiple times, and preferably with good domain knowledge. And that's sort of exactly what Rajiv brought to the table. He had run multiple large businesses, including VMware, our largest competitor's North American business, which is actually quite a bit larger than our business. He had scaled that profitably. He had scaled large businesses at Cisco and other companies before. So he had really the perfect skill set, we think, sort of the operationally focused skill set to profitably scale a business. And that's what he's really brought to the table, helped us to sort of focus on fewer, bigger bets, sort of streamline our product portfolio, really finish that transition to a subscription model, and kind of build in an operational repeatability into our go-to-market motion and our sales processes. And you've seen that in just a much higher level of consistency in terms of how we've been delivering to the street. I think you could certainly argue we've had 5 beat and raise quarters, and some of them predate Rajiv, but essentially over his tenure, we've been very consistent in hitting the targets that we put out there to the street. And that's one of the things I think he brought to the company.
Yeah, I think the last several quarters, you've really seen that inflection in the business, the product offering, the financials, and obviously you had Investor Day recently where you laid out kind of the roadmap into the future. Now, going back to the product, why do people love the product? I know there's different things, right? Net promoter scores, all these things are incredibly high. You go to Gartner, you go to Forrester, you're in the top right quadrant, meaning vision plus product kind of is the best way maybe to summarize what that is. Your customers love the product. Why do you think they tend to engage and just embrace it?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. I think the biggest thing about our product is, one, it just works, and it works really simply. So it makes the lives of our customers a lot easier and enables them to make their data centers much more efficient and require fewer man hours and man minutes to actually to manage them. So that's kind of at a very high level, and I think that leads and that kind of drives that very high NPS score. I mean, we have almost a freakishly high NPS score for an infrastructure software company. It's been consistently over 90, whereas this type of company, I'd say, is normally probably closer to half that. So customers do love our product. It's the ease of use, the simplicity. It's also the choice we give them. One thing we've always done from the very beginning was to try to give our customers choice. We gave them we think, the best sort of core HCI stack, but then we let them choose their own hardware, their own hypervisor, their own public cloud if they want to move the workloads to the public cloud, whether that be Azure or AWS. And now as we move sort of into modern applications, their own sort of Kubernetes distribution and runtime, whether that be our own that we have built in, or for instance, Red Hat's OpenShift, which we recently partnered with. So really give them a lot of choice. And so we've been able to grow our customer base pretty substantially, needless to say, over the last several years. We're now at about 20,000 customers and growing, and we see that as still lots of opportunity to add more customers there.
Awesome. Two things outside of Nutanix in general. So one is you just released the Enterprise Cloud Index report. I think you guys do this annually in partnership with potentially other organizations. But the Enterprise Cloud Index report, what are you doing there? What was the general takeaways? I think for us, again, we read it, and it's incredibly compelling for your space. And what is the report at a high level, and then the general takeaways?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. So you're talking about the Nutanix Enterprise Cloud Index report, right? So this is something we do annually. It's a survey of CIOs trying to just understand what their challenges are, how they view the challenges, and what they're thinking are the solutions to those challenges as you look out in time. So I would say that the number one takeaway is around the operating model that they think is going to be the preferred operating model going forward. I think 83% of our respondents said they see hybrid multi-cloud as likely to be the preferred operating model for them and others over time. And what that means is basically that you would have probably some workloads on-prem, some workloads on likely multiple public clouds. So it's really having the ability to manage workloads across a variety of different clouds and do that efficiently and simply and sort of with minimal overhead. So that's kind of the number one takeaway. In sort of double clicking a level into that, we asked them, like, what do you see as the key sort of challenges? And they talked about simpler management across, mixed cloud infrastructures, not surprisingly. Common dashboards across different cloud infrastructures, and then just help with managing things like security, data integration, and cost. Now, suffice to say, we think our platform helps you on all these fronts. We are a hybrid multi-cloud platform. We do make it simple to manage across multiple clouds. We do have security built into the platform. We help manage your data across clouds with our files and objects products, as well as our database management products. So we think the trends that we've identified here, that have frankly been a continuation of trends we've seen in this report and in other industry reports over the last several years, play to the strengths of our platform.
Yeah, and that takes me to the next kind of like conversation is Amazon AWS. They've had a series of outages over the last several months. Again, not talking about the outages themselves, but just simply put, how do organizations think about their biggest cloud vendor essentially going down, whether it's for 1 minute or 1 hour, and how that potentially increases demand for solutions that are thinking around hybrid multi-cloud like Nutanix?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a great question. And I think it does exactly that, in that it reinforces this idea that you don't want to be reliant on any one cloud or any one public cloud provider, right? I think that speaks to the whole hybrid multi-cloud strategy, which, you have, it builds, you have some sort of built-in safety there, or disaster recovery capability, when you have your workloads distributed across multiple private and public clouds. And I think when you have an outage like AWS had recently, it kind of reinforces this idea that you don't effectively want to have all of your data center or app runtime eggs in one basket. So again, that's sort of what we do, is we enable you to simply and easily and efficiently manage workloads, on-prem, off-prem, back and forth, and across multiple public clouds. So I think, Amazon is a good partner of ours. Our product works well with them. We have a partnership to make our platform work with their platform. But at the same time, I think, when they have an outage, it kind of reinforces this idea that you don't want to necessarily be tied to just one public cloud vendor.
Got it. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. The last couple questions. So how should we think about Nutanix kind of over the next 2 to 5 years in terms of product and in theory, like financials? You've laid out some of this stuff recently. So
Yeah.
Just reiterating maybe some of it and yeah.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I think from a product standpoint, I think we would look to further leverage, the leadership position we have in the HCI market to become the leader or a leader in the hybrid multi-cloud market. I mean, our platform, we think we already have all the big pieces in place. We just want to keep driving innovation in that platform and just making it easier to move workloads across clouds, supporting more public clouds on our platform. So we just see sort of doing more of what we've done and becoming, a leader in hybrid multi-cloud, just as we are in HCI. And then from a financial perspective, I think we're going to really start seeing the benefits of a maturing and a subscription model gaining momentum, right? We're going to generate, I think, a lot more leverage from the building renewals pipeline I talked about, right? So we kind of laid out on our investor day that over the next couple of years, you're really going to start seeing bigger and bigger tranches of renewals come up, or business come up for renewal. And that's going to drive not only sort of visibility in the top line, growth in the top line, but also a lot of efficiency in the model, because it costs about 80% less to secure a renewal dollar than it does to secure, a dollar of new business. So lots of leverage, I think steady growth from this maturing sort of subscription flywheel, if you will. So yeah, that's how kind of we think about the next couple of years.
Yeah, that makes sense to us. I'll leave this last question here as kind of an ex-analyst, 23 years. If you're putting your analyst hat on, and again, your personal opinion, and it's not a recommendation from them, but if you're putting your analyst hat here, what do you think? What do you think most investors potentially miss in terms of the story at Nutanix?
Yeah. So one is, I think that you noted there's been a lot of transitions and it's been kind of messy. I think maybe folks that haven't taken a look in a while don't fully appreciate that we're 90% subscription. So the transition is largely done. So one, we're a subscription software company. Two, we put out a forecast at our investor day for 25% CAGR top line growth of our ACV billings. And this is kind of the key metric for us while we're still seeing a little bit of term compression. But so effectively, we're saying we think we can grow 25% plus top line over the next several years. We've begun to show that already on our ACV billings. Our revenue is slowly catching up to that, and it'll take a little while because we're still seeing a little term compression, but we did 20% year-over-year growth of revenue in our last quarter, and that we think will gradually accelerate as the term compression we're seeing kind of ebbs. So I'd say, we're basically trending towards a 25% top line grower. And then finally, the piece that I think, takes a little work to sort of drill into is how much both top line growth and bottom line leverage, particularly sales and marketing expense leverage, will be driven by renewals. As I said, renewals are tremendously more efficient to transact than new and upsell business, 80% less. And so when you see that mix of renewals that we laid out pretty well in our investor day deck, see that growing substantially as a percentage of our business, you're going to naturally see our sales and marketing percentage come down pretty dramatically over the next several years. And that's going to drive just much higher profitability. I think when you put all that together with where we're trading today in terms of EV to sales, for instance, yeah, there seems to be a bit of a disconnect in the sense that folks don't either fully appreciate it or maybe fully believe it, given that there has been a number of transitions there. So, our job is to keep going out there and just executing quarter after quarter, and we think eventually investors will get that part of the story.
Got it. Yeah, no, when it becomes obvious, I think it's obvious. And anyways, I appreciate you coming on and sharing some of the details and joining us today at our event, and hope to have you or speak with you soon in the future.
My pleasure, Sean. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, Richard. Yeah, so that was Nutanix. It was obviously a great conversation. Everything that he discussed, again, we believe is happening. This is a multi-year transition that we think we're at that inflection point, as I said, where you do see kind of top line and bottom line both head in similar directions. We'll see that over time. And again, as investors, we are patient, but also long-term oriented, and also seeing some of the traction that is actually taking place. So there's traction there. Now, next up, I wanted to talk to Sensor Tower. Sensor Tower is one of the leading data providers, and I'll let them explain their own thing. We use their data sets for analyzing app downloads and other types of information. They're one of the best. We wanted to understand different macro trends and different areas and categories that are exciting and or just trending either up or down. So we have Dennis from Sensor Tower. He's joining us now. So let's welcome Dennis. How you doing, Dennis?
Hey, doing well. Great to be here.
Yeah, no, appreciate you coming on and sharing some of the information and just in general. So just tell us a little bit about Sensor Tower. What do you guys do, and anything else that you want to share?
Yeah, so just a quick overview of Sensor Tower. We basically give a bird's eye view of everything about the mobile app ecosystem. So that'll include things from mobile app download estimates to revenue estimates to even usage estimates and engagement. So to that end, any app that's basically on the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store, we can generate a lot of data and insights on everything there, whether that be from a categorical standpoint or just even looking at a specific app or a company. We have data available for everything there.
Yeah, no, great. Yeah, no, it's we use you for that. So appreciate that. Now let's step back and just talk about broad highlights and macro trends that you're seeing in app downloads or revenue that you want to share.
Yeah, so I think one thing that I want to highlight is with 2021, it is lapping a very strong 2020 because of the pandemic-driven adoption of a lot of mobile apps. We saw 2020 have a pretty strong growth in terms of overall downloads worldwide. Now, digging a little bit deeper into that is kind of looking at the differences between the Apple App Store versus Google Play and what that really means. So with Google Play, we saw around almost a 30% year-on-year growth in worldwide downloads in 2020. And then we saw that continue, but to a lesser extent, around 3% coming into 2021. So now this contracts what we see with the Apple App Store, where we saw around 12% year-on-year growth in 2020 and actually a 5% pullback in 2021. So what that really means is the increasing importance of a lot of these developing markets. So markets such as India, LATAM with Brazil and Mexico, and then just in general Southeast Asia like Indonesia, Philippines, and Vietnam, where we're seeing a lot of growth. Now, from our end, we see a couple reasons for this growth, and a lot of it is just increasing competition among these really large quote unquote super apps that have seen some consolidation in that area, and really aggressive user acquisition campaigns that are trying to basically carve up that market. In addition, with looking at India in particular, which is far and away the largest Google Play market, is the ban of Chinese apps in 2020. So apps like TikTok also taking that out kind of gave a power vacuum where there's a lot of domestic players trying to take up all those users that were basically vacated once certain apps were banned. So I think that's something that we're seeing on the macro side, especially in these developing markets.
Got it. So let's hone in on a couple different categories, if you will, and wherever you want to start. So everything from kind of ed tech, we had Duolingo CFO on earlier, social platforms. Obviously, we had one of the app developers within the Oculus ecosystem. There's TikTok out there, obviously, well. Health and wellness, if possible. We talked to another company that measures foot traffic, Placer AI. And they were talking about Planet Fitness in the physical world. You guys have the information in the digital sense. And then gaming in general, and that kind of goes back to Oculus. Ironically, yesterday there was obviously the big announcement with Activision, which is interesting timing in terms of talking gaming and such. But anyways, my point is, any of those topics that you feel you want to pinpoint, wherever you want to start.
Yeah, I can definitely hit on all of those topics. I think I'll just start from the top. Just looking at edtech in general. So education apps and this space, similar to what I was saying earlier, is lapping a very, very strong 2020. But what the interesting trends that we're seeing is that a lot of the growth is being held onto in 2021. And again, similar to what I was saying earlier with a lot of these macro trends, a lot of it is driven by these large developing markets such as India and Indonesia. So with edtech in particular, there is some questions on whether it's a shifting paradigm towards a lot of these virtual environments or whether it's still temporary. Now, if you had probably spoken to me maybe 2 or 3 months ago before Omicron, I would probably say that maybe it is a little bit of a growing shift. But because of now, there's another new wave. We'll probably need a couple more months to see whether these download gains in the education category will be held on to. So that's, I think, my general take on edtech. And now honing a little bit in on Duolingo. So some interesting trends that I've seen with Duolingo is, not to bring up India again, but they are a very large market. Their download performance in developing markets since the beginning of 2020. And something that we've seen is the potential impact of Duolingo's English certification tests. Now, while this isn't directly related to the mobile apps, Duolingo's mobile app in general, we see a lot of acceleration within developing markets such as India, especially given the pandemic and given the difficulties of test environments. We're seeing some positive impact in user acquisition and retention in a lot of these new markets. And then in addition to that, Duolingo as more of a digital native service compared to some legacy language learning providers, like, for example, Babbel or Rosetta Stone, you do see a lot of acceleration over the past even 2-3 years, where Babbel was perhaps an incumbent and was generating a higher level of revenue, but Duolingo has really been able to blow them out of the water with a lot of their recent initiatives and just having in general a very good subscriber retention.
Yeah, no, interesting. Yeah, we did see something in the data around year end, which again, fitness and some other categories are very similar in terms of year end and kind of goals for the next year. Some of it is travel and trying to learn a language, where we saw record, I guess, revenue and downloads for that short period of time. I guess going to the next one, and we'll maybe do in reverse because I already talked about health and wellness. Is health and wellness? So what are you guys seeing in that category as a whole? And then we'll go back to social platforms.
Yeah, so health and wellness, with in early 2020, obviously health and wellness, the most important period is probably going to be January of the new year, as people either perform or don't perform on their New Year's resolutions. But with 2020, given the impact of the early pandemic period, we saw a kind of a double spike in downloads and revenue and just general interest in health and fitness apps in 2020. And because of this, this kind of led to a more muted early 2021 in terms of new downloads. However, if you look at it from a revenue standpoint, we still saw a kind of requisite spike in 2021 that has kind of held steady coming into this new year. But now that we're almost through January, our data is showing that downloads for health and wellness in 2022 have kind of returned to the typical year-on-year growth that we see in the space. Now, particularly interesting is a pretty outsized increase or an outsized spike in revenue for this new year. Now, again, it is still a little bit early, and we do need to see maybe give it 1 or 2 months to see how retention is for these apps. But revenue does seem to be really increasing and kind of similar to just general interest in the health and wellness space. But again, these are subscriber apps, so we'll probably need to return to this topic in maybe March or April to really understand the impact and see whether these gains are going to be held on to.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think one thing that we've been thinking about as well is like obviously some of the more physical locations are requiring for their own benefit, right? Is the app download to then check into your health club, and ultimately what that does futuristically is here's a communication channel that they didn't have in the past. For the most part, it was more like a nice to have the app to check in. Now it's kind of a requirement because of COVID. So you're seeing, again, companies like Planet Fitness and some of the other ones that are in the physical space really embrace that that communication channel and really trying to futuristically look at that as a way of communicating, create offers, add guests to join you as well. Next up is social platforms. TikTok is all the rage, obviously, over the last, I'd say now 2 years, possibly. And then you have, again, companies like Facebook and Instagram and some of the things below it, WhatsApp, and whether that's social or just communication. What are you seeing in the social space?
Yeah, so I think I'll probably just use Facebook or Meta's suite of apps to kind of just frame the conversation. With WhatsApp, we're seeing a definite pullback in terms of new downloads. A lot of that is because of security issues and just privacy concerns over the last 2 years. Now, what we're seeing replace that is basically the almost meteoric growth of other more privacy concerned communication apps, communication messaging apps such as Telegram. So I think that's the main story on the WhatsApp side, is just a basic pullback, basically since the beginning of 2020, that has really continued and almost sharpened in 2021, it almost in conjunction with the rise of these other apps. Now with Facebook's main app, it's kind of the same old story, where they still that they basically have an almost just clear momentum as one of the biggest apps in the world, where basically month to month or quarter to quarter trends are going to be relatively stable for that app. However, looking at Instagram, we have seen a lot of growth, especially in international markets where mobile adoption has kind of been increasing. Now with Instagram in particular, last summer they had, or in summer of 2020, they had mentioned kind of a shift to focus on video and short form video. And while they didn't mention this directly, I don't believe, from an outside perspective, this is really to compete with and look at TikTok. Now, looking at our data in particular for TikTok and Instagram, we're still seeing TikTok having much stronger time spent gains than Instagram. So, for example, in our data set, when we look at just Facebook users or Facebook users that use TikTok or Facebook users that use Instagram, we're seeing TikTok having gains of 20 to 30% in time spent since the beginning of 2021. Now, another pretty interesting point is I took a look at TikTok users and how TikTok users use Instagram or how they use Snapchat, and we actually see that TikTok users that use both TikTok and Instagram actually use Instagram at a lower rate than the average Instagram user, and we see the opposite phenomenon with Snapchat. So from our data, we kind of maybe see that Snapchat has some sort of complementary usage, while Instagram is still struggling to be a quote unquote replacement for TikTok, even with the addition of a lot of new video based features.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, it seems like that whole category is kind of this tug of war. I think Q4 or Q3, Instagram had more downloads than TikTok for the first time in like 5-7 years. But engagement again is the other flip of the coin of that. Now turning to gaming, or whether we can Oculus and some of the other topics. I know we were going to talk about Zynga. I don't even know which one we want to talk about now, but gaming as a category, what are you seeing there in terms of more macro trends?
Yeah, so from a more macro, taking like a step back point of view, there's just a lot of industry consolidation, especially over these last 2 weeks, and I think a big reason for that consolidation is, especially in the mobile world, is IDFA changes that were pushed through last year. So these changes basically made basically change the landscape for mobile gaming and kind of encourage a lot of vertical integration rather than kind of just snapping up more titles and more IP. So in this case, with looking at Take-Two and Zynga, I think a very important acquisition that Zynga had made in recent years was Chartboost, which is actually an ad network. So this basically brings a lot of advertising and ad tech in house for Zynga that is now going to be part of Take-Two, and then with Take-Two basically just having an expanded mobile portfolio is really beneficial to is just going to be beneficial to them, especially as Zynga looks to kind of expand out of just mobile with one of their new upcoming titles, Star Wars Hunters. So with Take-Two and Zynga in particular, there's just going to be a lot of synergies, whether it comes to on the advertising side or the hyper casual side, as well as on console PC, and adding a lot of Take-Two's signature IP like Grand Theft Auto and bringing that to a mobile world. So that's I think that's our general take on Zynga. I think in gaming in particular, there's still going to be a lot of impact that we're seeing with how IDFA affects hyper casual, and we're seeing that in a sense with how download trends, especially particularly in the U.S. where it's a pretty competitive market, we're seeing downloads of that category, which has traditionally been the highest downloaded subgenre in gaming, kind of have a pullback all throughout 2021. So yeah, I think those are some of our some more macro takes. And then I know you had mentioned Oculus. So Oculus itself actually, within our data, their companion app, so the Oculus app, had record downloads in this past Christmas, almost, I think, past doubling their previous record in December of 2020. So I think with that and a lot of the speak of stuff like the metaverse, being able to kind of link up mobile with VR AR, as well as a lot of these metaverse focused games like potentially Roblox, has been a definite trend that we've seen, especially in the latter half of 2021 going into 2022.
Awesome. Yeah, no, Oculus, another Meta Facebook company. Interesting to see that. And again, I think the Golf Plus VR founder expressed the same thing, where he saw 5 to 6x type of downloads and for his game inside of the Oculus store. So definitely echoes that. Do you have an Oculus by chance?
I do not. I actually have a different VR headset, but I was looking at grabbing another one, but not yet.
Got it. Yeah, no, they're cool. I just got one, so it's definitely an interesting device to say the least, and you can see where kind of this can go down the road. Yeah, look, that was a lot of topics. I think obviously thanks for coming on here and sharing some of those. For the purpose of Sensor Tower, how can people find more information about you guys and contact information if they did want to reach out? I know you guys do a lot, so whether it's yourself or just the website.
Yeah, so our website, app.sensortower.com, is where you can find us, as well as I can be reached at my email for any questions on anything in the mobile app ecosystem, whether that be from like any of the topics we had described today to even just general discussions or macro discussions about the app ecosystem. So my email is my name at sensortower.com. So DENNISYEH at sensortower.com is where you can find me.
Got it. Dennis, well, I appreciate it for coming on and sharing some of the details around the whole app ecosystem. Again, we'll be in touch, and thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, so that was our final guest on the event. It's already been quite some time, almost 2 hours here. What we wanted to do, I wanted to bring on Chris Fuentes, the analyst here at Avory, and kind of go one by one over a couple minutes and just our quick takes on each conversation that we had. And so, Chris, there he is. So Chris, welcome. Obviously, let's go one by one. I know obviously you did a lot to put this together, but also in general, we always analyze many of the same things independently, of course. But in general, let's go kind of starting from foot traffic with Placer AI. What was your initial take on what Ethan had to say about some of the trends within some of the categories?
Yeah, thanks, Sean. I think so. One of the key trends that stuck out to me that Ethan was mentioning was sort of the idea of retailers optimizing their fleets, right? And so I think we've seen over the past 2 years, let's say, since COVID started, a lot of companies thinking twice about whether they need as many stores to reach customers. And then conversely, I think a lot of retailers thinking about putting in brick and mortar stores as a method of acquiring customers or increasing brand awareness. And so we've seen the balance between kind of like the large scale retailers scaling back. And I think we've also seen small scale direct to consumer brands, let's say, really using those brick and mortar locations strategically and kind of like a leaner, smaller footprint to help, I guess, acquire customers more efficiently.
Yeah, I think one of my takes was just the holiday season extension. I think it makes a lot of sense because a lot of people are looking at retail sales numbers and the skews of what it was to last year to 2019. And the reality is people are shopping differently. Ethan, I think, echoed that. They saw that in the data sets, and that people shopped earlier, and therefore October looked incredible, while maybe November and December or certain periods looked a little bit different. I know for one, Best Buy was offering obviously Black Friday deals like 2 months in advance, and they would lock in if you got a better price on Black Friday, they would match it. And they would automatically match it. So they knew that they were going to give you the best price. We knew supply constraints existed across the board in terms of all of retail. Therefore, the likelihood of cost reductions was going to be limited. That speaks to the margin profile a lot of these businesses will likely see in the future. I think the other thing is, again, health and wellness. Obviously, we talked about it with Sensor Tower, but I think health and wellness continues to be a category that's coming back strong and consolidating. Again, going back to Planet Fitness, saying that 15.2 million members, that's basically back to where they were as COVID was beginning. But they're coming in much leaner and much more efficient in terms of the footprint that they have. So pretty interesting conversation there with Placer. Next up was Duolingo. Speaking with the CFO there, your initial thoughts on Duolingo?
Yeah, so Duolingo is a company that we've done a lot of work on, but I think at a grander scale, just the space as a whole, we have our innovation block we call the future of education. And I think what that really means is we're going from the classroom taking place within the four physical walls in the physical world to now sort of an increasing abundance of options, whether that's massive open online courses like Coursera, Udemy, and some of these other platforms. Or if it's the Duolingos of the world targeting some very, very specific areas to start, I guess, like language learning. I guess specifically about Duolingo, what's very interesting there, is how they're sort of repurposing the platform to service other areas, including math, which is very exciting. And I think, again, they're not necessarily competing with the Rosetta Stones of the world. I think it's a very, very different game that they're playing. And I think of the long run, you are sort of seeing kind of new market creation. And I think, honestly, the best part of that interview to me was the idea that they don't know, how big that market is, and they're sort of pursuing it. And a lot of it is this new market creation taking place. And I think that's very exciting for them because it could potentially mean have large implications down the road.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think they're a dominant brand, and Sensor Tower echoed that thought where their magnitude's more of like kind of the second, third, fourth competitors in the space as it relates to like language learning apps, right? And again, I think the concept of them stepping back away and making it very clear that they're not just simply a language learning, right? They're a learning kind of company app. But also within that, they have different characters and content that you could easily, if you have a child and you've seen things on TV or Disney, like characters, to create a character is really, really hard. And to have that ability and then bring on someone that literally led a lot of the children content and beyond that at PBS, I think says a lot about their ambition, but also maybe the realization from Linda to come over to realize that, hey, there is something here on that content creation side that is exciting. Going to the next one, Golf Plus VR. It's always interesting to talk to like developers and people creating inside of ecosystems. Your initial thoughts of that discussion?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very exciting one. As you know, I also now have an Oculus, and I think it's an incredible device. And I think we're at the very, very early stages of that flywheel just starting to spin. And so what I mean by that, so Ryan was speaking about how they just saw multiples, like their app downloads multiplied, or the number of users they have multiplied, which is incredible. Brings in a whole bunch of new revenues you had mentioned, and then where can that capital be allocated? Well, there's a lot of investments into expanding the product itself, but as if you zoom out and look at the whole developer ecosystem, all that money is just being reinvested into improving the experience. And I think a lot of the friction has been removed compared to where it was maybe a few years ago, which is great. I think it shows in the numbers today, but I think there's still a lot of room for it to run clearly. And so as that flywheel continues to spin, I think it'll be really exciting to see sort of what takes shape, in the future. Yeah.
I guess for me, quickly, it was what pinged my ears was his satisfaction with the Oculus ecosystem, for one. Two, acknowledging that they're light years ahead in terms of the product that they've created. It speaks to the rationale potentially behind the name change. And also when you think about the product that he has created, obviously it's changed its name a couple times, but previously it was still affiliated in some ways with Topgolf. So it already had this brand, but what changed from then and now, where he saw 5-6x explosion in the usage or downloads of his product? Partially probably a brand change and things like that, but it's more importantly is that you're starting to get consumption of the product. And that's ultimately how networks and ecosystems grow and develop. So I think, again, going back a year ago to now, there's evidence here that this ecosystem is growing pretty rapidly in downloads and also satisfaction. Next is Nutanix. Your general thoughts on Nutanix. It was good to get an analyst, historical analyst, right, for many years of obviously understands different nuances more than the average. So your take.
Yeah, so Nutanix, I think, is an interesting one, right? Because it's a little bit slightly different than the others. It kind of fits, I guess, both buckets. But I think what we've historically followed is this digitization of almost everything. And historically, I think a lot of people just thought that meant a big shift to the public cloud. And what has become more clear is that a lot of companies are now actually choosing to do multiple things, everything in between, which is essentially what the hybrid cloud ecosystem is. And Nutanix sat in a very interesting spot pre-transformation. And I think whenever we're investing capital or allocating capital, we're always thinking about companies disrupting themselves and willing to do that. And I think Nutanix has proven, clearly that it can do that and it will do that to survive. And not only survive, but it's clearly become one of the best solutions out there. And so by sort of disrupting themselves and moving independently from the hardware, I think that was very powerful. So at a very broad level, I think the story is different. I think it's very interesting. Zooming into the ecosystem as a whole, again, I think Richard spoke a lot about sort of the outlook of the next 5 years. They're one of the leading solutions now. A lot of companies really enjoy their product, which is hard to get, if you're a consumer, hard to get that feel for what companies think. But I think it's very promising. And at the end of the day, fits all the criteria that we like from an economic moat perspective, sort of that stickiness of revenue. It seems like really infrastructure of the 21st century. Maybe not as we had imagined it a couple of years ago, but now it's becoming increasingly evident that it is very important.
Yeah, no, I agree. This is definitely this durable product that they've built, that where contract lengths are roughly like 3.5 years. So when a customer comes in, they're not only happy, but they're contractually sticking around. So you're happy and you're contractually sticking around. That's where when they refer to the renewal business, right? This was not a subscription model before. And if we think of how we subscribe to things in life or how we pay for things in life, a lot of the stuff we all do is subscriptions, and you kind of forget that you have these subscriptions in a sense. So think of something that's reoccurring, and after a year, it automatically renews. There was very little marketing spent on that renewal rate. And that's where Richard was talking about a massive decline in marketing spend for those renewals. So we love that aspect. And again, it's a transformation story, and transformation story is different from a structural growth story for us. It's really around this company disrupting itself several years back and going through the transformation that's required to be sustainable into the future. And I think that's a really strong characteristic of any business. Is if you think of 30 years ago when Apple was just a computer, and then eventually it was something else, and then they continued to transform their business, Microsoft as well. Again, not putting Nutanix in the same state in terms of where they'll end up in the world 10 years from now, but I do believe that it's this recognition that in some cases you have to evolve, and for us, it's about getting there at that inflection point or just before the inflection point, where the analyst community or investor community isn't necessarily as aware of the story until it's obvious and clear. Once it's obvious and clear, we think, generally speaking, markets are pretty efficient to understand this is the best company or product in the world, and you don't get that kind of that opportunity set. So last one is Sensor Tower. So again, we're users of Sensor Tower, and the beauty of I think this event was putting together a structural growth story, a transformation story, a developer inside of an ecosystem that we invest in, and then also data from both the physical world and the digital world. And Sensor Tower, again, something that we use regularly, if daily, hourly, to understand what are the trends inside of some of the businesses that we are involved with. So your quick takes on Dennis and Sensor Tower.
Yeah, Sensor Tower, clearly very interesting because it runs beneath all of the companies that we've spoken about today, all of the themes that we follow very closely. And I think, Dennis did a great job covering a lot of areas. And I think for me, I really enjoyed getting to hear the companies earlier and then tying what Dennis had to say with what they had to say. And so you could see clearly Duolingo doing very well domestically, but also internationally. A lot of, I guess, consumers flocking to the Duolingos of the world versus the Rosetta Stones. And you also mentioned Babbel in there, which I thought was interesting. So, from a company specific standpoint, really enjoyed that. Social is another area I think we speak a lot about. We have, clearly followed the space for a very long time. I mean, I guess almost since its infancy. And I think that's interesting because he talked about the meteoric rise of TikTok and sort of the balance in share, right? So whether or not somebody spends a lot of time in TikTok versus Instagram, and how users of both generally spend less time on Instagram. At the end of the day, I think that is an interesting point to make. I think a lot of people have the mentality of a zero-sum game where people are going to go to TikTok, and because TikTok is growing rapidly, Facebook is somehow going to be impacted negatively. And I think that's a huge company that really just goes to show how powerful their network effects are at the end of the day, and that the game isn't really zero-sum at all. And then also, I guess, lastly, was just around fitness. Clearly we have a lot of interest in Planet Fitness, but also companies like Peloton, which we follow closely. And you mentioned you own one, and I think that's interesting as well. But sort of what's going on with the consumers there, and then also the whole transition in how consumers use apps now as a medium to go into gyms on a daily basis, et cetera. I've had to do that several times as well. And so I think it does open up a new interface, a new communication channel with the companies and the consumers, valuable digital real estate that didn't exist before.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good take overall, and I won't even add to it. My kind of want to end there. I guess generally speaking, thanks for everyone that tuned in. This will be recorded and sent out as well. So anyone that is here now, obviously you'll know that, and anyone else, I guess we'll find that out after the fact. Now, if you wanted to reach out to us at all in any way, you could email me, Sean@avoryco.com, team@avoryco.com if you wanted just a generic email, or Chris@avoryco.com. In general, what I wanted to leave you with is we'll have more of these. This is Avory Idea Day 2022. We may bring on and do the semi-annual one, but we will make this an annual, longer event with even more companies as we move into the future. So I appreciate everyone joining or listening in after the fact. I hope everyone stays safe out there. And that is really it. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.